Request to talk.
All right.
Yes, I'm listening.
Yes. So since we had a bunch of people asking about our ATS 7 upgrade in the Slack, figured it might be good to do a talk on what we've gone through. Since now most of our production is running ATS 7. By the end of the week, I think our whole production will be ATS 7. So.
7X, does it matter what 7X is, or are you going to get into that?
Ours is close to the master of 7X. So they just did a 713 release like last week. So we're a couple of commits right before that. So we have to do another release because there's a fix we need for H2 in there, but we're pretty close to the master of 7.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, you want to.
That's what's breaking my stuff.
Pay attention to H2. Yes.
Yes, I think it's breaking some of our stuff too.
Yeah.
So some of the issues that we worked around in traffic ops, they changed the logging format to Lua. So we've had to change ORT to be able to output that correctly. Switch over to traffic control from traffic line, since traffic line is now completely gone in 7X. Switch over to the cache key plugin from cache URL, because cache URL no longer exists. And just various parameter changes and stuff, which I have a link to at the end of this if you need a list of them. So the logging config changes, the way we changed ORT to handle this, it uses the exact same parameters as the old XML one. You just have to change the actual file that you give it to logging.config instead of logging.xml.config, and you should get the same output Lua file. So there's not much to it. ORT handles it for you. So it's just, instead of being an XML formatted file, now ATS expects a Lua formatted file. But the input to it is still the same parameters in traffic ops and traffic portal.
So we have a parameter that is file name logs underbar XML or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It didn't change at all, but it spits out a different file.
So right now there's a parameter that says this is the output format. Like it has all the ATS variables. And then it says that goes into logging.xml.config. So if you just change that to logging.config, then it'll put it in the Lua formatted file instead of the XML formatted file.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what then somehow traffic ops generates on the whatever. What do you call it, config files up here. Because you're the owner of config files up here. I don't even know what. Yeah.
So when ORT sees that it's a logging.config file, it makes the Lua version instead.
Yeah.
So traffic line to traffic control, that was just swapping it out so it calls traffic control correctly. So there's not much there. But traffic control does exist in 6X and, as I heard from Steve, 5X as well, so it doesn't completely break backwards compatibility. Hopefully nobody's still using 3 or 4. It's pretty old. So the big one is cache URL to cache key. So cache URL is gone in 7X. To be able to use cache key in 6X, you have to pull in a couple extra patches that people have done. So I have links at the end of this. Plus, there's also a migration document in Traffic Ops in the documentation that lists the patches you would need there if you want to be able to pull this into 6X. So it changes from using the regex lines that we had in there to now you give it different parameter values for what you want it to manipulate the key to. So you have to get rid of your existing regex value if you use one for the cache URL and start using these instead. So what we've done is we put them in the delivery service profile since they're delivery service specific, and so they just get assigned that way.
They are delivery service specific. I actually still not understand the usage of delivery service profile. If the delivery service profile is a one-to-one assignment to the delivery service or not. In this case, it sounds like it's going to be one-to-one assignment.
It doesn't have to be. You can have multiple delivery services pointing to the same delivery service profile.
But can you point a delivery service to multiple profiles?
No.
No, but you can there might be several considerations in choosing a delivery service, a profile for delivery service. So this is one consideration, the cache key.
No, this is you make the parameter part, so you select parameters and you can add parameters to it.
Yeah.
It's the same as with server.
We're doing a one-to-one. If you don't need anything special, then you don't make a profile. If you're doing MSO or cache key or anything like that,
Then
you
you
make a
need
profile, you add your parameters to it, and you call it a day.
Yeah. So in our
And we name the profile to match the DS.
so in our conversion of this, we didn't have a lot of delivery services profiles for the ones that I had to add cache key support for. So they ended up getting whole new DS profiles because they didn't even have them before this.
Because only the MSL ones had delivery service
Right.
profiles, right?
Right.
I believe that adding more and more things to this profile will just make works work.
We had
More
this
difficult.
conversation with Jan. We lost it.
So
Yeah.
do all our delivery services have a delivery service profile?
Not all of them.
Not all.
We didn't-
Just
Yeah.
the ones that are using MSO or the cache key.
Right.
A lot
I
of
think he's saying that when we get to self-service at some point,
You will.
it feels like it might be
I
a
still
tough
don't
obstacle to
understand
go.
why that is, because I think it makes things easier.
From my perspective, it seems hard to ask a regular self-service customer, say, put all these attributes on your delivery service. And if you want these two features, create a delivery service profile and do this thing called parameters and profiles. Because now you've exposed a new world to them.
So
Um,
you're saying the flexibility makes it hard. So what I would suggest.
Yeah, like they don't need that much flexibility. Some of these
And I
customers-
agree with that. So
Yeah.
in self-service, I would think that we hide that from the end user and we create wizards or other shit that actually generate this stuff. But I don't know that you can get away from having a delivery
No,
service.
you
profile.
can get away.
Easily.
You can you can break the delivery service table to separate areas. The area of content management, the area of operation, active, inactive, the area of routing decisions. You can split the table and
Either,
Maybe we
then
should lightning
compose.
talk this.
either way, it can be transparent to the end user. I mean, there's no reason the end user has to see.
Yeah, it should be
anything
transparent.
else.
We don't want to derail your whole
Okay.
talk. We should maybe talk about
Lightning
it.
talk it tomorrow or something.
Okay.
Are you going to go into the 6 to 7? I was a little bit confused, and I want to make sure that people here understand. So here you are, you're a CDN, you're running ATS 6. You want to be a CDN that's running ATS 7. What are the 5 steps you need to do to get there? Because it sounded like first you need to build a new version of ATS 6 that is compatible with some of the changes you're going to need when you do 7. Is that? Or are you going to go into that?
Well, here I'll sort of cover that. The first step that you really have to do is cache URL to cache key,
Okay.
because you have to ensure that your keys are going to match up between versions. So you're going to need a version of 7 that you can test with, but you're also going to still need your version of 6 that you can pull your original cache key or cache URL value out of, just to make sure you're matching up so you're not invalidating your cache.
So only if you're using cache URL.
Right, only if you're
You
using
are.
it.
Am I?
You would be surprised at how often cache URL gets used when we
So
say,
there's the
when you say like
0,
query
1,
string handling number 2, bang, poof, it uses it.
Well,
You use it more than you think.
the query string ones we handle under the hood
Yeah.
in ORT, because that one was hidden and
Okay.
there's not like a good manual way to do that. So that one we changed under the hood.
So
But if you have a cache URL value set, that you have to manually change to one of these.
I'll check, but I don't think we got any of this. So that might simplify it.
Okay.
I'm a little bit worried about this because when we upgraded from 6 to 7, we had Evan doing all this work, and he's very meticulous, and he made sure we didn't wipe all our caches. And I want to make sure that we give the rest of the community all the tools and learn from your experiences. That's
Yeah.
why I'm sort of pushing this point.
Yeah. Well, that's why I have a lot of this in the migration document, and then there's also a lot of links in this presentation,
Good.
so you can find everything you need in here. So there's some examples here of just simple host replacement, just one-to-one host replacement. You go from having the regex on the left to now you just give it this static prefix value that's your host replacement. And then as you get into more complicated ones, hopefully you're not using some like these. But There was one that included the original host after the one that you wanted to replace it with, so you would have new FQDN, old FQDN, and the full path. So that one's shown here with a more complicated capture prefix. The capture prefix URI is generally you're creating your whole own regex again, and you're wiping out a simple host replacement or anything else. So if you need to do more advanced stuff, you have to use this capture prefix URI parameter for this plugin. And then the last example just strips off the parameters and leaves the path. That was another one that we had in our CDN. So that one, you can just use the remove all params value for the cache key plugin and gets rid of the parameters. So some stuff it makes easier, and you could sort of tell what's going on just by looking at it. And then more advanced ones like the capture prefix URI stuff makes it more complicated because you can't really just look at it and tell what's going on. And you'll definitely want to use the ATS Xdebug plugin as you go between those. So that'll let you pull out your current cache key for URL that you pass it. And so then you can match up between old and new until you make sure you have it right. Because if it's wrong, there goes your cache.
So that's the header you set in your curl request?
Yeah. And you have to run the Xdebug plugin with whatever ATS instance you're running. So you'd have to run it in your version of 6 and your version of 7 to make sure that you're matching them up correctly.
Looks like we get the Q-string drop stuff, is it?
Yeah, Q-string drop you get for free. Everything else you have to do by hand.
Not at all.
So that was most of the migration stuff. And then at the very end, I have a link to the ATS change log stuff where they list the parameters that have changed, because those you just have to go through and do by hand. Some of them, they've gotten rid of the parameters, and then some of them, they've gotten rid of a bunch and then condensed them down to one that has a whole new name.
Sounds like Mike's
Yeah. So there's a list of those at the end. There's a link to them where they list out everything on their documentation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I figured. I was kind of expecting the same.
So one new thing that we're running with and sort of still testing now is something that John Rushford and Vijay Mamadi did for their Nextstop project, where now they can mark parents up and down just by using a traffic control command. So this should make maintenance a lot easier because you can just issue out traffic control and tell all of your caches to mark either mids or origins down, and that'll propagate way faster than having to mark them admin down and get it spread out through the system.
Question, how, could you use, that's what I was gonna say, could you use that with some kind of script that checks the traffic monitor? If the traffic monitor says the mid is admin down, you can call this and flag. Set the parent down.
You could do that either way, yeah.
It's gonna flap a lot, I think.
I think we're gonna take the whole mid-tier down because they're all looking overloaded, and traffic monitor's just gonna take them all down, and then poof, you got no mid-tier. That would have happened to us last Sunday because all of our XCR mids were over, like in the 40s on their load.
So maybe you have safeguards, like maybe you can compare them or something.
Or we just set a really high load
Yeah.
threshold.
So you can say if there's only like 2 left, don't mark them down.
Yeah, every
That
yeah,
sounds
you could do something like that.
Or something, there's gotta be something.
Why not just?
So with this, you can do a host status call with traffic control. It'll tell you if it thinks the host is up or down. And so that'll come back either from if it's been marked down internally by having timeouts or whatever, or if you set it down through the traffic CTL host up-down command. So there is a slight delay because of how this goes into ATS. It goes in through the traffic manager, which then has to propagate into ATS itself. So there's a delay between you marking a parent up or down and it actually happening.
Is up different than what the current state is when it's in, like when it, maybe you should rephrase. When you say up and it's actually not up, it's still gonna do the right thing and not use that server, right? You don't force it to be up and actually have the traffic flow through it.
I'm not sure.
This is why we have admin
Yeah.
down reported and
Yeah.
online in the edges.
Yeah.
You gotta go on every edge caches that report these mids and do this.
Yeah.
So what's the difference from going admin down and queues up all the edge caches?
So this is
That actually changes the remap .config file. It's a bit heavy
Change
handed.
the remapper.
Parent config, yeah, sorry.
Okay. And is that a problem or?
It can. I mean, it could take longer to propagate out versus this.
Yeah, unless you've got a script that runs ATS. For those that aren't patient.
So, I don't know. It was something that John Rushford and them wanted for their next top stuff. So, I don't know. We included it, and they're starting to use it. The bigger one that we put in was JMalloc. So, instead of using the standard malloc, now we're using this for all of our 7 boxes. So you can't really do much memory debugging just because current tools are way too slow to be able to use in production, or you have to recompile them in. And some bugs you just won't even see for weeks. And you can't just sit there running debug versions for weeks and not really show the problem at all. So JMalloc, you can just pull it in using an LD preload, so it'll override the malloc that's compiled into your application. And JMalloc will sit there and it will do dumps for certain time periods plus for certain memory bounds as the program uses up more memory, and then it'll dump out to a file that you can then analyze later. And it's similar to the JProf or the GNU-Prof tools output. So you can analyze that using dot, which this is probably hard to see, but from this we could see that within we lost 5 gigs in about 20 hours from the left side to the right side. And if you trace it back up through the tree, it led to a parent reconfigure call. So we could see that basically any time we were doing an update and updating the parent config and ATS was reconfiguring that, it wasn't releasing the old one. And so we were just losing memory every time we did an update across the CDN. So this helped us track that down, and now that's out in 6x, 7x, and master of ATS. And because of JMalloc, this only took couple days to a week to track down. So it's very useful to have out there, especially if you're doing your own custom plugins or anything where you can end up with memory leaks.
It's been fixed. I mean, we've seen a lot of memory leak when one of our parents would go down, for example, origin or something downstream. We would have issues and the parent would get marked down and go to failure threshold and come back. Sometimes you would see the memory go down and it would come back up.
Yeah, so yeah, if you were doing something where your parent config was constantly flapping.
I don't think the config was changing. I think the parents were changing, right? State, I don't know.
That still might hit a parent reconfigure call, which would still pull it in. Yeah. So yeah, your issue might already be fixed out on an update.
So does that mean that memory leaks are easy to find now in ATS?
They're a lot easier, yeah, than they used to be. So
we only have a couple of hundred now.
yeah. So there's still the issue of ATS using the free list, which we've tested with disabling the free list, which makes using JMalloc a lot easier. There's still a couple issues there, but that's why if you can't really see on here, but at the very bottom of these, it has ATS memo line marked as using like 98% of the memory. It's just because JMalloc doesn't understand that it's holding all that memory in ATS's free list. So it just marks it as lost memory, even though it's just being used for the cache itself. So that's sort of the problem with still using ATS's free list. Besides that, though, it's very useful tracking down memory issues. So highly recommended. The only other thing we had to do was just set up a Conscript to go through and just clear out the old dumps. And each dump is only at most like 200K. And we get them every couple hours, so it's not even that big a deal to have a couple weeks or a month's worth sitting around. So then, just here's useful links for later. If you need the original JMalloc ATS presentation, that's how we got it all running, was from Kit's original presentation. We have the traffic control migration doc in the traffic control docs. There's the ATS cache key instructions along with some more examples and the 7 upgrade notes. Is there any questions?
I'm very sorry if I missed this, but is there a release plan for 7.x for traffic control?
Well, what's out there now in 2.2 works with 7x.
I probably should put a default profile up for 7.x.
Yeah.
Also includes in the documentation of 2.2 are instructions to migrate.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean the main things you have to worry about is the couple of new parameters, doing the cache URL to cache key conversion,
Right.
and then updating the logging so it goes to logging.config.
Okay.
That's pretty much it that you have to worry about.
And you got the parent stuff, you got JML, so you can find stuff. General better stability, I think.
Yeah,
What we see, right?
yeah. I mean,
It seems like additions rather than things that can trip you up on a, like the parent thing just seems like an additional function.
yeah. Well, and even then, that's not even including 7X. We were just bringing that in because it works with 7X, and we had a couple people that were working on that feature that wanted to test it, so it's usable.
Well, 7X removes cache URL, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that you really do not. It completely removes cache URL.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have seen general much better stability, I think.
Yeah. Like right now, we only have one real core that we know about, and that's already fixed in the actual 7.1.3 release.
You have to beware. Tell them about H2.
Yeah, so right now we're hitting an issue with H2 that I've only gotten to look off and on since I'm out here. I don't really know all what's going on,
So
but I know.
it's manifesting itself in a couple different ways.
Yeah.
Right?
So is it on by default?
Yes,
And,
H2 is on by
H2 is
default.
on by default, and we see clients, Comcast clients that you will be serving as well in Cox that pull images will by default start using H2 as well, and specifically they do have a very different behavior in reusing the connection, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's some of
And
them are getting
server
cut
and
off.
Client don't necessarily agree on how long that they can reuse that connection, and that's given us some troubles now that we're trying to figure out. To the point where we may disable H2 upgrades. You know, your client connects to the CDN at HTTP 1.1, and then if they both agree, they'll go H2. And that's given us trouble right now in Myriad and getting some of the images.
Trouble like sockets left open.
Trouble like clients saying, "Hey, I only got half an image intermittently."
So
Yeah, it's-
basically the client
Okay.
terminating the H2 stream when it should have.
Okay, too early. All right.
So what's the way to install this without enabling H2L? I mean, is there just something that says,
No, there used to be a single parameter, but it looks like that's gone now. So that's why I haven't gotten a chance to look and see how to actually disable
But
it.
they were talking about disabling it, so there's got to be a way to do it.
Yeah, I think Rushford or somebody may have found a way to turn it off.
Okay. Yeah, we also found that the thing that we were logging, which is CQHP or
So,
something,
yeah.
I mean, some letters with C's and Q's and other things, that says HTTP/11,
CQHP.
still says
Yeah,
HTTP/11 when it's H2. And we were like, what?
CQHP.
So we're working through some issues there.
It sounds
That's
like
awesome.
too. I haven't been keeping up with Slack enough. Maybe Jeff has, but it sounds like maybe there's some TLS issues bubbling up.
Yeah, there was something about the.
Related to H2 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some disconnect in the way that the cipher blacklists worked between H2
Oh
and
yeah,
HTTP
that was
1.1.
Yeah, that just came up this morning. It sounds like we have evidence to recall.
So I guess the moral of the story is that you may want to not jump on it yet with your production customers, but I think we're getting ready to start saying
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good, except for the H2 stuff's really the only thing we've seen so far. I mean, all of our edges have been running 7 for almost a month now. So, I mean, it's pretty good, except for now we hit this H2 issue.
On H2, are you seeing any performance improvements, any advantages over that?
the customers are pretty excited about it. A lot of our clients have been asking, hey, can we start doing this, the better parallelism, that type of stuff. They want to start using that, specifically people doing guide type stuff and putting lots of images on a web page, and those guys, they really have been asking for a long time. So they immediately started using it, and now we're sort of figuring out some problems with it, but I think they'll be excited to keep using it.
The TLS problem is our fault. We fat fingered one of the ciphers.
So maybe don't do that either.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of.
I'll put on my to-do list to get a default profile up for 7.1 if you guys want to start doing some testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Can you also figure out what the disable is for H2 so people that we communicate that?
Yeah, once we figure that out, I'll see if I can ping John and see if he figured out what it was.
It would be good if the profile had H2 disabled by default, just so nobody gets bit by it.
Does anybody still have ATS 5 out there?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean,
a couple of labs maybe, lab setups might have it.
Steve, you running production?
Not
yeah,
Cowboy.
it's just too stable.
He's on
What?
He's on 5.3, definitely.
This year, our edge have been up for about, like 600 days. Nothing happens.
I did have a sort of
boring.
question.
Are they up and down, like not taking traffic?
So,
It's pretty boring. Nothing happens.
I think Windows 95 is pretty stable.
given that 2.2 supports ATS 7, does that mean that, like, is there any incompatibilities between ATS 6 and the 2.2 or traffic ops?
No.
Where, okay, no?
No.
Alright.
Still works, and you can have a mix. You can mix and match.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what I
we
heard,
mix
right?
matching,
Yeah.
obviously as we upgraded, right?
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
You just have to flip the server profile.
yeah, different profile, yeah.
okay.
We took the CDN down for maintenance.
Big proxy config issue and it.
Yeah, that was the field, but I don't think that exists anymore in 7. So
We're getting